Despite the remarkable strides the non-interest finance market is making in the Nigerian economy, especially through the Sukuk bond, there is still a huge gap in Islamic finance education in the nation. This is quite different from emerging economies like Malaysia and United Arab Emirates that have developed a robust system for educating investors on opportunities in the market. A positive development in Nigeria is the recent plan of the Financial Literacy Committee of the Securities and Exchange Commission to integrate Islamic finance studies in the wider capital market studies curriculum. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Islamic Finance Weekly, where we discuss the key developments in the non-interest finance market. In this episode, we will discuss enablers for a robust Islamic finance education system in Nigeria. To lead this conversation with me is Mr. Isiaka Halidu, an MSc student of Islamic Banking and Finance at International Institute of Islamic Banking and Finance, Bayero University Kano. Thank you for joining us on the show today, Mr. Isiaka.
Thank you, Bukola, for having me.
It is a known fact that there is still a huge knowledge gap in the non-interest finance space in Nigeria. What is your take on the need for increased Islamic banking and finance education and trainings in the country?
Thank you for that question. I think this should be a non-compromise, especially that Islamic finance is gaining more traction in the country. For example, we have more Islamic banks and takaful firms. We have Jaiz Bank, which is a full-fledged Islamic bank with a national license. We have Taj Bank that came in about a year ago. Yeah. We also have Sterling operating. We have Al-Noor Takaful, and we also have Jaiz Takaful. And most recently, we've had 3 sovereign Sukuk issued in all and all oversubscribed. Now, what this tells us is that we've had a huge investors base or customers to manage. And definitely you cannot effectively do this without good human resources who are learning Islamic finance. Though there's this need to provide quality Islamic finance education that will churn out people with the requisite Islamic finance skills that can constantly innovate to meet and exceed the needs and expectations of the increasing customers and investors base. This is important for the survival and sustainability of the industry in the country.
All right, Mr. Isiaka, Islamic finance educational sector must giving keen attention to this knowledge gap. As an MSc student on Islamic banking and finance, what are the key steps to take in producing quality human resources in the industry?
Now, part of the steps I think we should take is to have a standard accreditation process for a minimum requirement for any institution or person to teach Islamic finance. This will hinder underqualified persons going about teaching Islamic finance because, of course, if you don't have the right human resources, then definitely you may not be producing the best persons to take up the industry. Secondly, I think the teachings of Islamic finance should not be devoid of practical teachings. Islamic finance itself is a practical course and should not be taught purely as an academic course. Okay. So while we go into the exercise of teaching Islamic finance, we should have students of Islamic finance going through practical knowledge as to how to innovate in the industry and come out with good products. Also degree awarding institutions should make it part of their training process by ensuring that students or graduate with professional students, by ensuring their students or graduates enroll in professional qualification like...
From your point of view, you mean Islamic finance education should be practicalizing in the tertiary institutions, it should not only based on theory, not only on teaching, it should be practicalized.
Exactly. Because if you look at Islamic finance as a whole, it's a practical subject. So if you tend to make the teachings more of the academic teachings, then you may not see that product innovation when students graduate and want to practice in the industry. Islamic finance is not theory. If you look at the product, the ways they are, it requires practical explanation, practical process. So it is important that we don't just go into purely theoretical academic exercise while teaching Islamic finance. We should look more at the practical and how students of Islamic finance can put it into practice. And just like I was mentioning, part of the suggestion we can make is that while these institutions are churning out graduates or producing graduates, they should ensure that they have put part of their curriculum to say these students should engage in professional qualification, like having the Accounting and Auditing Organization for Islamic Financial Institution, IOFI, which is one of the foremost standard setting bodies in the institution. Having these students attain their fellowship program like the CIPA and the CSA, that is a Certified Islamic Professional Accountant and the Certified Sharia Advisor and Auditor. And this is important because these qualifications, these are qualifications that exposes candidates to standards and regulating the industry as a whole, and also hands-on experience through the practical experience requirements of the fellowship. So if graduates are able to combine this in their training, they would have garnered at the end of their programs the required skills to lead the industry.
You made a valid point, Mr. Isiaka, when you talk about that Islamic finance education should be practicalized. You know, I totally agree with you. You know, when we look at the terminologies in Islamic finance, like when we talk about the sheikh, the riba, which is known as interest, the musharaka, mudoraba, you know, if a lot of people that don't even understand what mudoraba or musharaka is all about, you know, Islamic finance education, you know, that is additional work for the tertiary institution to incorporate Islamic finance education across the nation. Thank you very much for that insight. You know, as an MSc student, you know, are there job opportunities for a graduate who studied Islamic banking, considering the fact that there are only 2 full-fledged non-interest banks in Nigeria?
Thank you for this question. I think it's a question that most people who want to study Islamic finance are confronted with, especially that it is a new entrant into the what do I have? What is the value for money if I go and spend, if I go and engage in studying Islamic finance? Everybody wants to have value for money, but again, you know, there are many job opportunities in Islamic banking and finance industry in Nigeria. And the job opportunity goes beyond working in Islamic banks. There are opportunities in the academia because at times goes on with people understanding, with more people going into Islamic finance. You have academias, most universities, most other institutions awarding degrees in Islamic finance. So if you've gone to equip yourself with skills in Islamic finance by getting qualification beforehand, then you have the opportunity to be perhaps a lecturer in the academia. Also, graduates of Islamic finance could set up their own independent advisory firms and even training centers to provide quality Islamic finance training. Especially
like which institutions apart from BUK, Bayero University Kano?
Yes. I think that is one issue we also look at because as of now, I only know of the International Institute of Islamic Banking and Finance as the only institution in Nigeria offering a degree program in Islamic banking and finance. I think that also affects the industry. Although we may have 1 or 2.
I know we have Islamic Finance College of Education in Kwara.
Yes, 1 or 2 other private institutions. We have some undergraduate, maybe elective courses I know of Ahmadu Bello University, but though it is just recently, about 3 years ago.
But they are not really key into the degrees and what for Islamic finance education.
Yes, they are not really. There is no postgraduate, undergraduate degree program Islamic, but you have elective courses, and it was just recently. You also have, I think, in Sumadan Fodio University, who has been in the forefront of also giving education in Islamic finance, although not particularly degree. You could go as a postgraduate student to say specialize in Islamic finance. I think this is also a valid point to mention, and I would think we need to still look at how to expand in terms of investing more, perhaps in Islamic finance education.
Investment in
So with the growing demand
now.
So with the growing demand for Islamic finance, having job opportunities is a green light that people should look up to, and people should not be afraid to say it's a new discipline and may not have the opportunity to get a good paying job. There are opportunities to look up to. And apart from the opportunity, you should look at the way Islamic finance is. You should also look that it is a financial structure that looks at developing the country. So that should also be part of your consideration for going to study Islamic finance, apart from just the monetary aspect.
Exactly.
So you mentioned investment in Islamic finance education. So how will you describe the current levels of investment in Islamic finance education in Nigeria so far?
I would say not encouraging. A lot needs to be done in this area, I must say. We have very few specialized institutions, rather, just like we mentioned, just as we mentioned, offering Islamic finance knowledge in the country. So the government on its part is also lagging in terms of accessing Islamic finance knowledge through establishment of specialized institutions or center. And just like we also mentioned, for example, apart from the BUK, like I said, I do not know of any institution offering strictly degree programs in Islamic finance. There are also like we also mentioned, no undergraduate degrees. We've also mentioned this. So much so, a lot needs to be done in this place. A lot needs to be this one area that we really need to put efforts in terms of an Islamic finance.
A lot really needs to be done in the Islamic finance education in order to bridge the gap. So, when you're talking about creating awareness, education, so even the government, there is need for funding and infrastructure funding for the tertiary institutions across Nigeria. So now let's talk about Malaysia and United Arab Emirates. Malaysia and the United Arab Emirates are the leading hub for Islamic finance in the globe. What can Nigeria learn from these countries to grow its market?
I think the key learning point is is both countries' government had full support for Islamic finance. So this opened up drastically the establishment of infrastructures rather to support the growth of Islamic finance. For example, for instance, legal and regulatory frameworks are constantly put in place to support Islamic finance. And the capital buyer market is also being broadened to include Islamic financial instruments to assist liquidity management needs of Islamic banks in this country. Education centers have been established to cater for the manpower needs of the Islamic financial. Bank Negara Malaysia, that is the central bank of Malaysia, took the initiative to establish the first global Islamic Finance University, that is the International Center for Islamic Education, the International Center for Education in Islamic Finance, INSEF. So these are what we need to take from this country to expand the Islamic finance market in Nigeria.
Nigeria really needs to use Malaysia as a benchmark in order to grow its Islamic finance market. Malaysia and United Arab, according to Salam Gateway 2020 to 2021 report, I'm talking about Salam Gateway 2020 report, Malaysia and United Arab Emirates are among the developed Islamic finance markets across the globe. So a lot of experts in the non-interest finance industry have said that Islamic finance education is not sufficient in producing a sound graduates in Nigeria. So, Mr. Isiaka, what strategy does the country need to enhance Islamic finance education?
This is also another issue, a very important issue. For me, I think the best strategy is to invest more in quality Islamic finance education. Here, the government has a big role to play in terms of taking decisive steps to invest in Islamic finance knowledge, and also seeing to the inclusion of Islamic finance in secondary school curriculum. And the idea here is to catch them young, a strategy to catch them young that introduces young introduce the young ones early to Islamic finance. And the National University Commission needs to ensure more Islamic finance courses at undergraduate level. And we also need to develop a standard system for accreditation of Islamic finance courses in the country. Also, I also think with the new normal we have now, especially with COVID-19, which COVID-19 has created, e-learning should be encouraged, and Islamic financial institution can work with a local international Islamic finance education institution to provide virtual trainings to their employees. There could also, more of a policy suggestion, there could also be an initiative by private institutions, especially Islamic financial institutions and non-profit organizations, to jointly collaborate and invest in Islamic finance education. For example, we could have a joint and corporate social responsibility initiative by Islamic financial institutions in the country to establish a work fund, that is an endowment fund, solely aimed at establishing education that's purely for offering Islamic finance knowledge award certificates. I think with this, we will be able to come out with good graduates that will man the Islamic finance industry, or perhaps lead the Islamic finance industry.
And you highlighted some point there that there is need to really key into e-learning, because we are now in a digital world. So, and despite the new normal that we have now, so e-learning technology is now the way to go. So thank you very much, Mr. Isiaka, for your insight.
Thank you, Sister Bukola, for having me.
A major takeaway from this conversation is the need to deepen Islamic finance education in Nigeria, which must be given top priority by the education authorities in the country, as demonstrated by the Financial Literacy Committee of the Securities and Exchange Commission in collaboration with the Nigerian Educational Research and Development Council. There is therefore need for synergy between Islamic finance institutions, financial and capital market regulators, and education authorities to provide the enabling environment for the Nigerian non-interest finance market. And that will be all for this edition of the Islamic Finance Weekly. Log on to www.closureng.com for more information on Islamic finance. Follow us on our social media platform displaying on the screen. Kindly comment below and let's hear your thoughts, and also for your inquiries. Thanks for watching. See you next edition, and bye for now.